You're listening to the Voice of Islam Radio, broadcasting on DAB and via the internet 24 hours a day.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the breakfast show with myself, Dale, this morning. Now, I'm sure all our teenage listeners are absolutely wide awake at this early hour of the morning and raring to go during their summer holidays, so they'll be very interested to hear that the government is planning to change the driving tests, the learner tests that we all go through to get our driving license. So learner drivers in the UK will have to drive into and reverse out of parking spaces and follow directions on a satnav in a governmental push to improve drivers' skills. These changes are the biggest shake-up since the introduction of the theory test in 1996. The Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency also plans to double the amount of independent driving in the test from 10 to 20 minutes. It will also replace traditional test manoeuvres such as reversing around the corner with real-life procedures, including driving into a parking bay and back out and switching on lights or heated windows. The changes follow other reforms already announced, such as allowing learner drivers to gain experience on motorways and introducing a deposit that would be refunded to successful candidates. These were explored under a £2 million project by the Department for Transport, examining whether the current regime gives the best training for learner drivers. Gareth Llewellyn, the chief executive of DVSA, said that while Britain's roads are among the safest in the world, there is scope to do more to keep road users safe, particularly newly qualified drivers, making sure the test better assesses a driver's ability to drive safely and independently is part of our strategy to help every driver through a lifetime of safe driving. About 1.6 million driving tests are taken in the UK every year. In the past 5 years, 3% reported road accidents had the contributory factor of learner or driver inexperience. The changes have been trialled for a year with more than 4,500 learners and 850 instructors at 32 locations and will be introduced following a 6-week consultation which closes on 25 of August. Steve Gooding, the director of the RAC Foundation, said these proposed changes recognise that it is more important for candidates to demonstrate the ability to drive independently on high-risk roads than the skill of reversing into a quiet cul-de-sac. The new approach will be deemed a success if in the longer term it produces better prepared drivers and we experience fewer road casualties. So it's quite an interesting discussion. I'm sure there'll be plenty of 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds out there who are learning to drive who will probably have quite strong views on this. We're joined now by an expert in the area, Mr. Waqi Ahmed, an experienced driving instructor and in charge of the Elephant Driving School. Mr. Ahmed, thank you for joining us on the program this morning.
Yep, you're welcome.
So what do you think about the changes being implemented into the UK driving test?
Well, my personal opinion in regards to this, I mean, there were a number of different changes that we were actually backing up beforehand. I don't know if you heard of it or not. There was one, what we was calling it a graduated driver licensing scheme, which were actually, the government was actually looking into it and was actually bringing this to it. I will discuss that later, but for now, these new changes, which is actually just coming to play next year, I think is these proposed changes to this driving test. I would think that personally it would better prepare new drivers to actually improve their skills, which will, I think, greater contribute to improve basically the road safety, really. Because I think the main issue is the youngsters, because at this moment right now, they are actually, if you actually look at the any of the report. Actually, I think there was a recent report that was in 2015 published by the Department for Transport, and they basically said that there were actually 5 people were killed or seriously injured on the various road collisions where a car driver was aged between 17 and 24. And I think these proposed changes actually will contribute, to reduce these casualties, especially at the age this age group. That's the reason that insurance for these ages is quite high anyway. So, and I think we all actually looking and working towards these changes, and we are looking into how we could actually prepare youngsters to face this sort of, especially driving in London nowadays, compared to previous years. We have a number of different situations on the road. It changes dramatically in only take a seconds to change, really. So therefore, we know that these youngsters would be using new technologies such as satnav, and new changes. Obviously, it's not only a satnav, but there is a number of different manoeuvres they have actually taken out and added the new manoeuvres there, and plus they actually because at this moment right now we have only 10 minutes of independent driving. So where the examiner normally asks a learner to follow road signs or road markings for only 10 minutes, but now it's actually going to be changed to 20 minutes, because the reason is that so that we want to see how the person will be after the test be driving independently, so that we are actually have changed that from 10 to 20, and that independent driving will consist of using a satnav. So the examiner basically already would use from choose either 2 different sort of segment of independent drivings from A to B, and then from B to C, or could maybe C to D, and having to see how the person will be doing the multitasking by using this satnav, because I think the recent survey clearly shows that they actually show that so many people are using a satnav, and now no one actually uses the map anymore. So they don't even 75% of the people don't even have any sort of maps in their cars. Everyone is actually using a satnav. So since everyone is using a satnav, so why can't they be trained more better to do the multitasking? Because right now there is a very strict law there where the police actually stopping so many people to use or texting the phone while they're using a car. So we think is that this is as dangerous as using a phone, because if someone is using a satnav while they're driving, so as soon as you take the eyes off the road, it's a distance normally is traveled, the car traveled, and you may not be aware of what's happening in front of you. So it's more of training in a better way to actually to tell them how you may perform multitasking by using this satnav, and not only taking the eyes off from the road ahead and not just using a satnav, but looking ahead as well. So, and I think these changes will actually contribute quite greatly to road safety, basically.
And one thing that did catch my eye about this story is that learners are now going to have to pay a deposit before their tests. How much would that deposit be?
But this deposit thing hasn't actually. This is not actually coming to immediate play. The new test is coming definitely next year, but they are still actually looking into it, and they have open consultation going on for now to see if that would help. Now, that deposit, basically, what they are saying is that this deposit, the reason of having this deposit is basically stopping people not to actually quickly go for the test, and having to understand that, listen, if you actually, I think there were some issue, discussion going on where they said that even if somebody passes the test on their first time, even the DVSA will actually refund their driving test fee back to them. But it hasn't been decided. Now, this is kind of it's like a reward being offered to these youngsters, and saying that, listen, you may actually have a proper training, and like for example, again, that GDL, graduated driving licensing scheme. The reason that hasn't come in play, or it hasn't actually gone through the parliament, is because that requires quite big changes in the law. Now, that changes is the same thing as what they proposed in those changes there. All the stakeholders, all the insurance companies, and all in the driving industry, all the stakeholders were backing this up and saying that, listen, why don't you actually bring some sort of changes where you could convince people, especially youngsters, to have a better training, rather than, because there's no any restrictions. See, if somebody, you see, in UK, you can apply for a provisional driving license 3 months prior to your 17th birthday. Now, you have your provisional license before even you are 17, and on the 17th birthday, you can straight away go and do the theory test, and after 3 or 4 weeks, you can do intensive training, and you can become you can be on the road. Now, but the thing is that age is the age where a person is likely to take quite a lot of what do we call it? They're not really facing the real challenges on the road. They are risk takers, so they normally take quite a lot of risks very easily. Now, the government is trying to. The reason of having this deposit things coming into light is because what the government is trying to say is that, hang on a minute, we will give you the money, we will give you that deposit back, or that even money back, but if you pass the first time, have the proper training. So they're kind of convincing people to have a better education, so that so they are less likely to involve in these kind of accidents if they actually have some sort of a number of set lessons before they go to the test.
And what would be your advice to either learners or people who've recently passed their driving test when they're setting out on the road?
Well, there are a lot of schemes out there anyway. As you might be actually aware of, what we call it Pass Plus schemes, which is actually what we normally call it is absolutely failure, because even though a lot of people actually pass the driving test, they're never driven on a motorway. They never even actually have driven on any sort of rural areas, and they just they just pass the test. And I think is that again, there are so many other charities, organizations already out there, like for example, Royal Society of Prevention of an Accident, ROSPA, and we have IEM, which is Institute of Advanced Motoring. These are two very big charity organizations within this driving industry, which actually out there, they are not charging anything. IEM, for instance, they are actually out there. How they work is somebody who passed their driving test and they want to improve a further want to have further training, and they have a better education in a driving career. So what you do is you just call IAM, and you have yourself registered. They only pay £34 to have yourself registered, and what they do is they will tell you, okay, your meeting point is, I think I know the local group is in Richmond, so the people either meet up in Richmond or New Malden, where they have police officers. They are actually helping so many youngsters, so many people who are actually taking quite interest in improving their drivings, and they actually bring quite a lot of new skills to it, like they introduce them how to do a commentator driving. So when you are actually on the road, when you're driving yourself, you're not just looking ahead and dreaming something else, but you are actually looking into and having to see what's happening ahead. Or what, let's suppose if someone is running on the left side and the bus is stopped on the right side, when you're looking at the person, you exactly know what this person is going to do. So they are actually out there, they're helping people, and once somebody actually does these sort of training with them, they don't charge anything. And they actually do give out advanced qualifications, and you could actually save quite a lot of money on your insurances. The insurance companies normally do promote this sort of trainings, because they do ask that if you have any additional qualifications, such as IAM or ROSPA.
And this is actually quite an important subject for a lot of new drivers in particular, or young drivers under the age of 25, about how to keep their insurance premiums affordable. But coming on to driving on the roads in London now, London's the traffic, for those of us who've driven in somewhere different, in a small town or up north, it's very, very much more aggressive here in London.
Yes, it is, yeah.
What do you think are the biggest mistakes or biggest dangers that even experienced drivers are making here in the city, which we can improve on and make our roads a little bit more safe?
I think we always use this phrase. What we normally say is that that one thing that everyone should and must understand is that that no one owns the road. Everybody shares the road. Now, what does that mean? Is basically when you are on the road, you have a responsibility to share, as well as you as a driver, and anybody who's a pedestrians. They are sharing the road, therefore they have some responsibilities as well, such as is that if a pedestrian should really cross the road at the safest point, but not actually putting other people at the risk either. Let's, for instance, not crossing at the bends and things like this, where they have any crossings nearby, they must use that crossing rather than having to cross just before the crossing, so just nearby the crossing. So similarly, I think any driver who's driving, then they start to forget is that they actually drive sometimes like as if they own the road. So if everyone actually, this is exactly what the highway code actually states right at the start, is that you must actually be responsible, being on the road, and you must have these responsibilities to perform. And I think if everyone is understand their responsibilities, what their responsibility is of using these roads, and I think these roads will be a better and safer place for everyone.
And do you think that we need to take a little bit more care about our environment as well? Because there's this issue now about how cars, especially old cars and cars that use too much fuel, could actually have a negative impact on people's breathings and on the wider environment as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have a quite a really good actually points there. But I think this is the reason that the DVSA normally starts these campaigns, what we call it eco-safe driving, where the DVSA actually, I remember just I think 1 or 2 years back that there was a lot of leaflets were distributed by the DVSA. At that time there was DSA, not DVSA. So, but they was actually giving out these leaflets in a green color, and where they had these sort of tips that what you need to do in order for you to actually reduce these carbon emissions on the road. So the one thing that when we are normally training, we do normally tell people that you try not to unnecessarily use the lower gear, because the more the lower gear you are in, the more the fuels you are using, and the more the carbon emissions you are producing, and that actually contributes, and also we always tell them that.
Sorry, I'm just going to have to cut you off there. We're just coming up to the news. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's really been very helpful, and I'm sure that our younger listeners can benefit from these practical advice. Jazakallah. Now the news.
Jazakallah.
From the sky.
You're listening to the Voice of Islam Radio, broadcasting on DAB and via the internet 24 hours a day.